parents and individuals that are working with youth to be able to have those conversations and, gain some success from that. Also, keep in mind, those of you that are joining the webinar today, if you are looking for CEUs, I will be sending out an email to all that attended, and you'll have to fill out an evaluation, and then we will email you that evaluation and certificate back to yourself so you can get those CEUs. All right. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions on a topic that is brought up, please feel free to use the chat function. And if we don't address it right then we will definitely leave some time at the end to try to address those questions. Okay. And so I will stop talking. And our speaker today, Christine McCall, I will go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll get right in.
Thanks, Olivia. Again, my name is Christine. I'm the clinical director at Peer Services, and I'm excited to be here today. I'm coming with you today from Chicago in the Edgewater neighborhood, and hopefully someday we can be in person together. As Olivia said, I really obviously prefer interactive sessions. This is such a strange time, so please throw your questions in the chat. I'll be kind of monitoring, and then certainly I'll be carving out 15 minutes at the end so that I can respond to those questions, and hopefully we can have somewhat of a interactive dialogue. So Olivia mentioned briefly about Peer Services. Let me talk a little bit more about specifically the therapeutic treatment options we provide specifically for our adolescents. So for our outpatient treatment, we provide early intervention. Early intervention treatment is kind of just as it sounds. So if a teen or a tween gets in trouble, they were caught vaping, they were caught with a friend's whatever substance it was, they most likely would come to us for an evaluation, and we would have a conversation, do a toxicology test, talk with the parents to determine, is this experimentation, was this a one-time event, or do they need further treatment for substance use? If they do, we offer outpatient counseling ages 12 on up. At this point, we offer individual treatment, but we are always very open to expanding our services based on the community need. So for instance, if there is a group of parents or a community that really thinks that their teens could benefit from a group of any type of topic area, we would love to host that and be happy to individualize that for you. We provide consultation for parents. We want people to call us with concerns so that we can talk through this with you and help to kind of understand what your options can be. It can be a really scary time when you have a teen that you suspect may be using. Of course, we do community presentations as requested. Again, we have a lot of funding that we're able to put on, funding from grants that we're able to put on these presentations free of charge. So we're happy to do it. Please let us know what would be helpful in your community. The therapeutic approach. So this is how we provide these services and how we do it, what makes us different. We do offer a very relational client-centered approach with adolescents. It's extremely important that we build that rapport, that we build that trust, so that they can open up to us and that we can then help them and help you as the family. We are very comfortable with both using abstinence-based and harm reduction models. Some people get a little concerned when they hear harm reduction, and I understand. I want to be clear that with adolescents, we always try to strive to gear the adolescents towards no use. We know that no use is the best alternative for adolescents. However, we want to make sure they're safe, and we want to get them there as quickly as we can. We offer very intensive case management and coordination with parents and schools. Treatment is only as effective as the participation with the other stakeholders and other family and friends in the client's life. So we always really encourage parent involvement, and we can also do family sessions. Fees and referrals, as Olivia mentioned, we do accept all Medicaid plans. We accept Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO. We offer very generous sliding scale based on income. We can slide that scale down to 0 if there's a need and there's an inability to pay. We never want people not getting the help due to financial reasons. So please call us if you're concerned or not sure if we take our insurance. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to talk through, what your options would be through us, and then also like if you wanted to explore what other options in the community for a higher level of care, I'd be happy to talk to you as well. Okay, so just to get us started, I thought I used to worry a lot about when my kids were little. Then I had teenagers. You know what I would give right now to worry about sippy cups and nap time? Everything. So I'm not sure who's in the room if you are parents, but I'm sure that if you are, you can relate to this. I am also a parent, although my son is 19 months old, and I do remember I'll never forget this moment, but when he was a newborn, and of course, if your parents in the room, if you remember how hard that phase was, and I was really struggling. And I remember there was a mom in my at the place I was, and she had a 12-year-old, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, just wait. Where you're at right now is the easy stuff. It only gets harder." And that was almost the worst thing I've ever heard. But I can understand that because there is the older they get, the less control that you have over them, and it gets more complicated. The relationships shift. So I'm hoping that to give you some insight and some guidance about things that you may want to think about if you are a parent in the room, and also if you are helping a parent. Okay. So I want to do a little introduction and reflection about myself, and then a love reflection, or offer you guys to share this in the chat if you're comfortable. But I'd love to know what you would like to get out of today's presentation. Why did you come here? What's important? I'd love to know if you're a parent or a provider, so I can kind of understand where the need is. And also, how has this past year been for you? If you are a parent in the room, you've struggled with just unprecedented challenges. And we know our kids are struggling. We know our parents are struggling. So I want to normalize and congratulate all the parents in the room for raising teens during a global pandemic. It's incredibly challenging. And I just want to acknowledge and congratulate you, because I think parents not often get any validation, certainly from our children. Okay. Oops. Okay. So for today's session, again, I'm going to talk, because I think it's important to start this off as talking about the current challenges teens are facing, both what we're seeing in the data and then also what I'm seeing in working with teens. We're going to talk about how to start the conversation about substance use, how to parent as a captain, and then I'm also going to offer some resources. I'm going to offer some resources that you guys can take with you and learn and grow from, and wrap up with a 15-minute Q&A of the questions that you're putting in throughout the chat. So let's get started.
We have a few individuals in the chat. I just wanted to say, one parent, she's a parent of a tween, interested in learning how to have conversations that will help my son know now and going forward. And we have another individual. I'm a parent of a 15 and 12-year-old. I want to try to keep open communication with my kids and try to be proactive when it comes to possible issues my kid may encounter.
Love it. That's so great. I'm so glad you guys are in the room and that you're thinking of this stuff early. And we're going to talk about how important and why that's important in a little bit. Okay, so we'll talk about the current challenges and the trends that we're seeing for teens. This is all taken from the CDC's Youth Risk Behavioral Survey of 2019. If you're interested, this is kind of an incredible survey. They have tons of data on lots of different topic areas. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to dive in. All right, so this is a statistic of high school students who had their first drink of alcohol before 13 years old. Let me preface, all of this data is not to scare you guys. It's just to give you information about what's currently happening so you can be prepared about the reality and how to and when to have these conversations. So from this data, it appears that 15% of high school students have had their first drink of alcohol before 13 years old. So high school students who currently report drinking alcohol, and I believe that what they defined as current drinking was drinking at least monthly. So if you see, that's 29.2% of high school students. But I'm encouraged by this because if you look at where the trend is going, it's going down. And so I think that is really positive, that teens are starting to have some awareness about, the real consequences and dangers of alcohol use. Marijuana use, this is high school students who tried it before 13 years old. It's about 5.6%, and it's pretty much plateaued. I will say that when we see teens at peer, almost exclusively, at least within the community that we see, we're seeing marijuana and alcohol use. Now, we definitely have seen marijuana increase on the rise, certainly even before it was legalized. But what I find really encouraging is that we not only do we see it on the rise, but we also see that the cause for concern is on the rise with teens. So teens are coming to us and saying, yeah, I do smoke pot. It's more than I want to, and I think it's a problem. So I think that's actually really positive that the dialogue and conversation is shifting, that more teens are acknowledging that this isn't just a harmless drug. So this is the one substance, like pretty much all the substances that we've seen over time have either plateaued or they've had a slow decline. Now, vaping is the one that we've seen a very sharp increase from 2017 to 2019. It went from 13.2% and 32.7%. And this is definitely this is congruent with what we're seeing at Peer 2. We're seeing huge increase of people that are using vaping. I do want to, though, kind of preface that when we see students that are vaping, even, and it can be problematic, and it's certainly a risk factor for continued use. Not everybody that we see vaping necessarily has a dependence to nicotine at that point. So what we're kind of seeing with vaping products is how, it's very similar to cigarette use. Some teens are doing it because, they want to be rebellious. There's social, there's peer pressure, but then some are actually getting addicted to nicotine. So I just wanted to kind of preface that from what we're seeing, even though there is a really sharp increase, we're not seeing, at least it doesn't appear that there is every kid that comes to us because they got caught with the vaping product is necessarily dependent on it. Although, of course, that's a risk factor that we want to address and talk about.
Christine?
Yes.
We have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Do you know why it went down from 2015 to 2017?
That is a great question. I don't know that answer. Yeah, I really don't, and I don't really have any theories of why that would be, but definitely I would, I'll see if I can follow up on that to see if there's any information on that. I'm guessing, yeah, I don't know. Actually, it's really interesting. Okay. So again, if you want more information about specifically substances and data, and they might actually have answer that question about maybe some why it did go down and go up, check out this survey online. It's very accessible and easy to navigate. I just kind of picked the big ones that we've been seeing. So also want to talk about, because we can't talk about substance use and not talk about mental health, right? They go hand in hand. I've worked in addiction for over 10 years. I don't know if I've ever worked with anyone who came in and just said, yeah, I'm addicted to this substance just because it's fun and I have no underlying anxiety, depression, or relationship problem. So it's important that we talk about those both together. So what we're seeing as far as now this is in 2019, I'll be really interested to see some data from this past year, how this has shifted, because I anticipate it will shift quite a bit. But even in 2019, we are seeing that depression, anxiety, and behavior disorders are on the increase, particularly depression and anxiety have a really sharp increase right now. And I would say this is very congruent with what we're seeing at Peer and what I've seen in my own practice. Even before the pandemic, there just seems to be so much more pressure on kids. Social media also has a huge influence on how kids feel about themselves and how they relate to the outside world. And so I imagine that this past year, not having completely, everything has changed for them. I imagine that this is going to continue, unfortunately. But however, we know that there are treatments available. Counseling helps greatly. So there are interventions that can be helpful, even though these concerns are on the increase. Okay. So what does this tell us? Well, the data doesn't show a significant increase outside of vaping. We still see that, substance use is still really prevalent in our teens. If we're having, upwards of 30% of our high school students that are using alcohol, it's out there. Anxiety and depressive disorders are on the rise, as I talked about, and teens are experimenting early. If you remember back to that first slide, the percentage of teens that have used pot or alcohol before 13 is significant. So we know now that, especially more than ever, that we need to have these conversations about substance use, mental health, and adaptive coping early. Of course, we do them age appropriate, but even with, even with our toddlers, right? There are great shows that really reinforce healthy adaptive coping, and we can start these honest conversations early. Okay. So I want to talk about, because, I think that as a parent, it's so terrifying to come into, the realization that your teen may be using. You find something in the room, you may be completely surprised. And so I want to talk about what are some reasons why teens use. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are headed for a life of addiction. So a big reason why a lot of teens use is experimentation. So this time in their year or their life, it's all about pushing boundaries and seeing and pushing for their independence. And that's a really good, important thing. It's really great that teens are doing that. However, some teens can walk away from experimentation and some teens can't. And so it's not always clear which ones, get it out of their system. But we do know that there are some risk factors and there are protective factors that allow some teens to walk away and some that develop further problems. So when we think about risk factors and protective factors, so we know that some risk factors that would predispose teens for future substance use in their adult years could be genetic factors, right? there is data that suggests that there is a genetic component if you have a history, family history of substance use. However, that's I don't want people to think like if you're sitting there and thinking, oh God, my dad was an alcoholic, now my teen, I caught him drinking and now he's destined. Like, no, no, no. It's just it could be that, right? But there are so many other protective factors that I really do believe that influence that trajectory more than the risk factors. The environment, right? The environment in which the teen is living in could be a risk and could be a protective factor. And when I talk about environment, I mean, not only the home environment, but the school environment, the community environment. What is going on? What is your community like? Are there supportive activities? Is it protective of like healthy activities for teen or not, right? So that's important to understand. Peer rejection, so painful, also is a risk factor for substance use, and of course, depression and anxiety. Underlying anxiety, depression, or behavioral concerns also are a risk factor for substance use. So this is why if your teen is struggling, if they're anxious or depressed, it's important to get them help or get help yourself, get a consultation to see like, is this something normal? Or maybe we need to like explore some therapy or some other interventions for that teen. The reason why is because particularly with anxiety, if you are more prone to anxiety and you don't know how to not feel anxious, alcohol or benzodiazepines are a common cure for that because they're actually really effective for anxiety in the short term. And so if your teen does have these risk factors, take them seriously and get them explored by your pediatrician or another professional. So all these risk factors, right? You've got pandemic, you've got peer rejection, you've got genetics. But let's talk about the protective factors because I think that those really do cushion your teen from a lot of this. And the most important protective factor are positive contributions to the children's life through caring adults, community, and friendships. And so if you have those pieces in place, those do a lot to eradicate the potential risk factors. I also want to talk about it's because I often get this question like, what drugs are on the streets right now? What are you seeing? What should I be aware of? What's the slang term? And I think it's important to talk about, but I caution people to not get too hung up on what is or what the new drug is, because there are always new drugs, new ways for people to get high that are coming out. And it's not necessarily the what, it's the why. And so when we're thinking about how we talk to our teen, we need to think about what is happening, what's going on, why is that substance helping them, whether it's helping them rebel, whether it's helping them with their anxiety. There's a reason why they're drawn to it, and let's explore what is underlying that so that we can address that so they're not drawn to it as much. All right, so I'm going to talk more about how you can specifically talk to teen about substance use. Again, this is a very short snippet. I'm offering some resources at the end so you guys can take this conversation further. A lot of what I've drawn upon is from one of my favorite books. It's called Parenting with Presence. I think it's just a really wonderful book, and what's wonderful about it is it uses self-reflection and how you feel about yourself that then translates to your children to help you become a more present parent. One of my favorite quotes from the author, Susan Steffelman, is, "We aren't raising children, we're raising adults." And I keep that in mind so often. Every time I want to go, I am such a sucker for when my son throws out his stuffed animal from his crib for the 100th time. And I'm going in there every time getting it for him. And I have to keep this in my mind that, like, what am I reinforcing by doing this? And trust me, I fail at it every time. But sometimes I don't. And this quote helps me not to do that. Okay. So in this book, Susan talks about this concept of being a captain versus a lawyer versus a dictator. And so uh, there are, in her mind, three approaches that parents typically default to, where the captain, the parent is in charge, right? Like throughout the life, that is where we want to be as a parent. The lawyer is filled with, constant negotiations back and forth. No one feels in charge, no one feels in control, no one wins. And the dictator, the children are in charge. And so take a moment to reflect with your own family. And of course, no judgment to yourself, but where do you think that you fall in right now as a teen, and over the course of your teen's life? Like, what is your style that you fall into more naturally? I'll tell you right now, 100% I'm in the dictator phase, and I need to work to change that, because that's only going to become harder. All right, so we know that being a captain, we want to be the leaders of our family unit. How do we do that? So here's some ways in which we can be a captain. So we're clear, connected, and present. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to be present with our children all the time. That is 100% not possible. No human can do that. But rather focus on having clear and connected, an opportunity of clear and connection presence daily, and build upon that. Like, set some realistic goals for yourself, and be gentle with yourself. Set boundaries with that empathy. So if you have a tween or a teen, their moods and emotions are just so different and changing on the minute, hour. And that's normal, that's good for their development. However, it's a little kind of crazy making when they are having such an intense reaction to something that doesn't make any sense, because our brains are fully developed and we have that rational part that they haven't quite developed. And so really restrain from the eye roll of like, this is not a big deal. Like, you need to just deal with it. Rather, roll your eyes in your head, that's okay. But if you come to it understanding that their brains actually can't get there the way that we can, because they're not developed in that way yet, continue to set those boundaries with empathy. That doesn't mean you give into the mood, but that you hear them and you understand that that's how they feel, and that's okay to feel that way. But that doesn't mean that they get to have what they're asking for, because you set that boundary for that reason. Setting limits with rules around substance use and partying. So this is how we start these conversations, and how we begin to set that framework about how we use substances, party, hang out with friends responsibly. We are clear about what that means, and we'll talk about how to specifically be a captain around substance use in the next slide. Be prepared to answer this question. If alcohol is so bad, why do you have wine every night? If you do. If you don't, that's great, right? But if you do use substances, you will get that question. And I think like the instinct is to say, I'm an adult and I can do it. That doesn't mean you can, right? But I think what children want, they want to be treated like an adult. They want to be having part of that conversation. There's an opportunity where you have an honest conversation with your teen about, what, I do use wine, and this is how I've come to that decision for myself. You talk about the pros, the cons of, why you use it, why you decided it was more beneficial than harmful. And then you encourage them, and you'll have that right to make that decision someday when you're 21. So it's not deflecting, it's being honest. And you're going to get this question, so start rehearsing it. offer honest pros and cons around reasons you choose or not choose to use drugs or alcohol. And remember, you are the ones in control of boundaries around substance use and partying. You get to decide what you're comfortable with and set that boundary. Okay, so how to be a captain around substance use. Supervision, knowing who your children's friends are, knowing where they're going, investigating. This doesn't mean that you're putting a tracker on them, although I'm sure you're tempted to do so sometimes, but that you're invested in where these relationships are. If it's important to you to, you're 13 years old. If you're going to see your friend, it's important that a parent is there, that you're checking that you're just aware of what who your teen is with. Monitor medications at home. So I really recommend, especially if you have medications that tend to be more abused and desired, like Xanax, Valium, sleeping pills, Vicodin, any of like an opiate or benzodiazepine, that you're keeping your medications, or actually, and marijuana, because we know it's legalized now, you're keeping all of that in a lockbox. And that's not to say that you don't trust your children, but one, you want to make sure it's safe for them and also anyone who's coming into your house, which means their friends. And you can talk to your teen about that. This is why I'm locking them up. You don't have to have it be a secret. Inquire about their friends' attitudes around substance use. This is where you use that opportunity to be present and connected with your teen around, you've been hanging out with, you know, Bobby a lot lately. I don't know a lot about Bobby. Like, what are his values? What is he like? And assuming that you've had the conversation around what your rules and expectations are around substance use, that's when you ask, do you know what Bobby's parents' rules are around alcohol and drugs? This just being more present and involved in their lives. And this is very important. Pay attention to behavior changes. As a parent, you are attuned to your kids. If you start noticing things like they are no longer wanting to do the things that they were so passionate about, their grades are plummeting, they're not talking to their friends, they never were moody and now they're moody all the time. That's something that you want to start paying attention to then ask the questions, could this be around substance use? I also want to preface that this is about the longevity, right? If your teen is moody and doesn't feel like going to soccer practice one day, that doesn't mean they're on drugs. But are you seeing their personality change? And there's a reason for that, and it's important to start asking the questions, what's going on? And it could or could not be around substances. Okay, so we're going to talk about, all right, I've got this information. I know I need to start these conversations. How do I start them? It's a very daunting task for a parent. And I want to just preface by saying the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's important to start small and to build upon steps when you're talking about these really tough conversations. Okay. So first and foremost, when we're starting these conversations, for instance, if you came into the room, if you discovered, a pill or substance when you're cleaning up your kid's room, and you immediately go to fear, panic, because who wouldn't go there? Before having that conversation, take a deep breath and work through it on your own first. You don't want to come into this conversation heightened, and I know how hard that is, but get some support you need. If you feel like there is no way I can have this conversation without screaming and threatening my child, you have a right to pause that conversation. You can let them know, I'm concerned about this. I'm too triggered right now to have this conversation, so we need to talk later tonight. That's okay too. listen. So your first priority for this first conversation with your teen, remember, this is building upon. You're not going to get this resolved in one talk, nor should you. But the first priority is to listen and offer understanding. And this is why you have to breathe first, because when we're triggered, we're irate, we're frankly disappointed in our kids and angry that we have to deal with this, we can't be present. So we want to listen to what happened, listen to what's going on, and offer understanding without condoning. Like, I think that sometimes people hear people, oh, if you empathize or understand your children, that means that, anything goes. And that's not the case. You're understanding their perspective, but you still are the captive. Presence. So be with the teen in this present moment. So stick to when you find something, when you're fearful of something, stick with that situation. Don't go into, I knew when you signed up for, this team that this would happen, right? Like, bring yourself back to that present moment so that you can continue that conversation. Get information. So you want to be specific. You want to know, okay, when did this happen? How long has it been happening? Why has it been happening? So you want to understand what interventions that you'll need to take. And we need the information first. And I think this is a really important thing. And I think this is how we can build that trust and attunement with our children, is offering vulnerability. And so if we share what we felt and also our personal experience, I think that goes a long way, right? Like, if we're in the room and we've either struggled from our own substance use, had a friend do it, or just experimented and it kind of teetered out, I think that's okay to share with your kids in these situations, because I think that can then build that alliance so that they feel like, I can talk to mom and dad. What we want to take away from this conversation is that they can come to us and talk to us when they need help. We don't want to set up a threatening situation so that they feel like they need to further hide, they can't open up. And be realistic. Start small and focus on small wins. You're not gonna get to everything in this conversation. You're not gonna solve the problem, and that's not realistic. And so, again, taking back to think through what are like starting the conversation. Whenever I start a session with a new client, my first goal is to understand them, listen to them, get the data, so that they'll want to come back and continue working together so I can help them. It's kind of the same thing with parenting. Okay. So I don't think we have time for this video, because I do want to open this up for conversations, or open up for any Q&A. But this is an incredibly great resource that I think every parent in this room should check out if it's for you. It's called parentingwisely.com. It is a interactive parent, I guess, course, you'd call it. They have a children one too. They're children and a teen, and I signed up for the children one. So what this does is it goes through really hard topic areas. It offers vignettes of, here's situation A, B, C, and it allows, it goes through each situation for you to think through what was handled well, what wasn't, what would you have done differently. And they're really helpful. And they also offer a really great community forum so that you have other parents that you can reach out to, get support around, because I think when you're going through these conversations around substance use or any hard conversation with teen, parents need help too. They need that support. They need to know that they aren't alone in this, that this is something that every parent goes through, and it's so hard. That's a really great resource. There's a great video around Emily, the actor in it, was uh, using pills for the first time, and her mom found them. So check that out on your own if you're interested. Um, hope that lasts. We're doing this webinar right now, but again, some resources. Parenting Wisely is a great resource. Also, Parenting with Presence. Um, I think that's an excellent book. I'd really recommend the audiobook if not most of us have no time. But check that out. And also call us a peer. If, in this conversation, you got an idea of, okay, I need to have this conversation, but I'm still wanting more specific information on my situation, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation. So please reach out. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop the share so that we can open up for any questions that people may have.